more resources, then y'all didn't have nothing.
Talk about that.
Exactly.
The conversation.
And I feel like we had resources, but not enough. And I would say more so for the kids who come from backgrounds like us, because as an athlete, they would always tell us, hey, there's a career networking event tonight. Go over to the stadium at 7 o'clock. And if you don't really understand what it means to have a career, you don't find the value of going to an event like that or even being involved with stuff like that.
At least y'all got notified.
Yeah.
At least y'all were told that there was something happening.
Yep.
We didn't get the notification. We didn't get the memo, and it wasn't no email back then, so we definitely didn't get an email. So there were a lot of times, most of the time, we had no idea that there was even an option. Like, subconsciously we knew, I think, but just in our everyday, going to practice, going to class, the focus was on, you came there to get an education and to play your sport. And whatever happens outside of that, coaches aren't, it's not my responsibility.
So, but now looking back at it, how do we feel? Is it our coach's responsibility to, whenever we hand our 18-year-old kid off to this institution, to these coaches, to spend the next 4 years of their life and grow up and mature, is it the coach's responsibility to make sure that, hey, after these 4 years, it's a very slim chance of this kid going to play professionally. It's my responsibility, or the administration or the school, to make sure that this kid is prepared for life and the transition.
I 100% believe that it is the coach's responsibility. Now, the coach can't do it alone, obviously, but making sure that the player has, or the young person has, access to the resources, takes advantage of the resources, has the people in place to help facilitate learning or gaining the exposure to those different events, to those different options, so to speak. So as a former coach, I always took it as a personal, personal responsibility for making sure that my players understood that this basketball, the time that you're here to play basketball, is just a small window of time.
Yep.
And once this is over, you still have the rest of your life to live, that you have to go out and be a productive citizen in society. You have to be able to provide for yourself. You have to be able to provide for your family. You have to be able to give back to your community. This is just, basketball is just a way to help shape and develop your habits and your discipline and develop character and develop your social skills and being able to develop your mental toughness and adaptability. All the things that you're going to need once you get out into the world. Now, having that understanding, you still have a job to do. You still have to win games. You still have to, coach. So, but I believe absolutely it is absolutely the coach's responsibility. It would be no different from me saying, hey, Ryan, I'm going to drop my 14-year-old son off with you for the summer. You're responsible for his development from June until August, but until I come and get him, when I pick him up, I should see some kind of change or some type of growth or maturity. And you're responsible for all of that, which means that you're responsible for feeding him. You're responsible for making sure that, he brushes his teeth and gets to whatever summer practices or whatever the case may be, not just one thing. So I think 100% it's the coach's responsibility.
Yeah, and that brings back the importance of great leaders being coaches, because often we feel like, and we've seen it, where a lot of the coaches can't relate to the players, and at the end of the day, they're not preparing them for the next 50 years. Right. So I think that, what we currently do, working with Amazon and being able to try and serve as a pipeline to give back and help coaches. You made a great point. You said the coaches can't do it alone.
Right.
The administration can't do it alone. And again, me being an athlete and going through that process, there was a lot of times where I was very prideful and ego was on my shoulder, where it was like, hey, go to this amazing event. It's not for me. I'll be in the NFL or whatever the case is. So we need leaders, though, because you put it on, you said, as when you were the head coach at Clark Atlanta, you made it your responsibility to make sure that your athletes understood the importance.
But that came from my own personal experience too.
Yes.
And a lot of times you see coaches, they can't relate because they haven't had the same or similar experiences. And what smart coaches, would do is you put people on your staff who have had those same or similar experiences to those of your players, but then you allow them to form those relationships. But there's still a responsibility. If you haven't, it would be kind of hard if you can't relate, just from a cultural perspective, from a experiential perspective, like regardless, black, white, Asian, whatever, we can all find some way to connect. But for me, it was personal experience because I was so ill prepared once basketball was over, and nobody had those conversations with me while I was playing. Like, I stayed on academic probation. My coach was happy to go and speak on my behalf to make sure that I was eligible, but not one time did I ever get a conversation of, Yolanda, you're not going to play if you don't get your grades together. Like, I'm taking that away from you. It was as if I care enough about you to make sure that you're eligible to play, but you graduating and you making sure that you're able to make a transition into having a life after sports, that's not really my concern. That's, looking back, that's what the message was. When I'll constantly get you out of trouble, I'll constantly make it okay for you. It's just like a parent whose kid comes from privilege and constantly gets in trouble with the law, and they always bail them out. Like, that, what lesson are you teaching them?
And it happens too far often. I mean, it's happening across, obviously D1, D2, D3 schools across the country, where what's the value for the athlete? And at the end of the day, the most valuable thing for the athlete and the schools is for them to be on the field, on the basketball court, and to be performing. As an All-American, you don't want Yolanda Moore not on the floor.
Absolutely.
In any time of the game. The fans don't want to see it, the administration, the coaches. So, I mean, how do we continue to intercept the problem or get out the message for young athletes that are maybe going into college, their parents, to say, hey, look, when you're looking at colleges, the number one thing that you should be looking at is possibly who you're sending your son to. Not saying that you or your daughter, not saying that you choose a school solely based on the head coach or the staff, but it's very important because that's who's going to mold them into the person and speak life into them and help them with career changes, career transitions, conversations that they need to hear.
Why I say that before, I said that it is the coach's responsibility, but it isn't solely the coach's responsibility. Like, the parents have have a responsibility to have those conversations as your children are growing up. I mean, just in general, like, you do what every parent does. You have those conversations that, okay, you're going to have, at some point, the ball's going to stop bouncing. You're not going to be able to run. You're not going to be able to jump. You're not going to be able to swim. What's the transition plan? So, and then that player, like, I don't think that the problem I see today is that with social media and parents who have unfulfilled dreams, who are trying to live vicariously through their kid and putting all this pressure on them to perform or go D1 or be the player that they weren't able to be, and they're totally dismissing what's best for that child. Like, what other dreams do they have? What other aspirations do they have? Have you spent time we send them to basketball and football camp. Did you send them to artist camp?
For sure.
Did you send them to cooking camp?
For
like,
sure.
Just to break up the monotony and let them know that they have an identity outside of just being an athlete.
Yeah.
That's the responsibility of the parent, because by the time we get them at 18, a lot of the damage is done.
For sure.
And so we have to do a lot of, there's kids come to college with trauma. We did it. I went to school with trauma, didn't know it, but in this day and age of mental health, you recognize that. So there's a lot of unpacking and unlearning and a lot of stuff that we have to undo. And the what I see a lot of parents doing is they drop their kids off and now you fix them, especially those discipline, the kids with the discipline problems. We expect coaches to be like, fix my kid, but no, it shouldn't be the job. But I think that it's a partnership.
Yes.
You talk about raising a kid, to get them to a point where they're 18 and I have to literally trust another person with my child's development as a young adult. And these are really, really critical critical times.
Yeah, and it takes a lot. You know, when we think about the athletes that are playing these sports, many of them come from underrepresented communities. Mm-hmm. You know, the ones that are on the field performing come from these damaged backgrounds. And just to be transparent, when we arrive on campus, like you said, we're damaged. And the colleges and the coaches by now have to understand that.
Yeah.
They speak about it often. If you hear commentary on, hey, this kid just got drafted. Do you remember he grew up in X, Y, and Z? He slept in X, Y, and Z with his, like, they speak about these stories, but are we preparing them at 18 years old, knowing that we're getting damaged kids, like the importance of being patient? Because oftentimes I've seen so many teammates come in, myself or friends, as damaged kids, and coaches don't understand it. They're not from that background, and by 6 months, a year, they've kicked them off the team and sent them home.
Right. Well, you got to know who you are, obviously, as a person
Mm-hmm.
first, and as a coach. Like, I knew that there were certain kids that I was not equipped to coach. Mostly the ones who were privileged and didn't want to work hard, who wanted, like, I didn't do well with those.
For sure.
The ones who kind of got it out the mud or were looking, you know, didn't have anything, this was it, I related better because that was me. But again, when you talk about preparing them for that career transition, and I think you have to have those conversations early, and just it's just like, you know, one person plants, another one waters, and then, you know, it's God who gives the increase. But it's like one person plants a seed, and then a coach comes and waters the seed. So if I instilled something in my children, some certain types of values and morals, then I got to make sure that when we're looking at where they're going to spend the next 4 to 5 years of their life as an athlete, I got to make sure that whoever that coach is, their values and their morals are in alignment with what I've taught my kid, so that now they can water the seeds that I've planted.
Yes.
I think that's the part where we, you know, when you're talking about in this whole process of recruiting and getting them there, we miss those steps. It's all about the shiny things. I want my kid to go D1. I want him to play for this school. I have a friend of mine who has a daughter. She's 9th grade. She's really, really good, like really talented. She wants to play for South Carolina. Now, I don't know Dawn personally. I know who she is. I know of her. I have really good friends who are really, you know, close with her. Dawn coaches great players. She wants to coach players who want to go pro. That's a different mentality. And so I explained to my friend, I told her, you tell your daughter if she wants to go coach in South Carolina, she's going to have to leave her feelings in Michigan.
For sure, for sure.
So you got to understand, you got to know your child and understand what they can and can't take. And then you've got to make sure that the person where whoever is going to be leading them and coaching them and developing them, that their morals and values are in alignment with the seeds that you planted, so that they can water them.
Yeah, I want to talk about more so of, like, again, we're discussing, you know, the parents preparing us as we grow up.
Right.
Our parents making sure that they feed us, water the seeds. But again, as athletes, making sure that we understand that we have to put some responsibility on ourselves as well.
Of course.
Because, you know, often we can't, you know, change the world right now. And things are going to have to change over time. And we understand that sports is a very huge business, and we're there to perform and play sports. But we have to also understand that we can, I guess, you know, capitalize off of networking, capitalize off of actually going to those events that you were unaware of, and taking pride in the fact that those things are now at least being presented to athletes, because I'm sure you would have loved to get a text message or an email and say, hey, come to this career fair and you're going to have 50 corporations here to speak with you.
Well, again, I would have loved to have had a cell phone. Let's just start there. But if there had been a LinkedIn back when I was playing, I would have been all over it. And, you know, working in talent acquisition, I do get a lot. Like just last week, I had a couple of student athletes reach out to me wanting to do like a one-on-one, just wanting to talk about, one is a junior, one's a senior, wanting to just have a conversation about what should they be doing, what questions should they be asking, how can, you know, just wanting to have a conversation about transition. And I think that what like as a sport, I don't know about football, but I do know y'all had position coaches, right? Same thing in basketball. We had, you can have a coach that specializes in offense, defense, shooting, things like that. But it's the same when you're transitioning into the next phase of your career, because you're transitioning out of one phase, which is sports, and you're transitioning into the next phase, which could be, working in corporate America, working in education, being an entrepreneur, or whatever the case may be. The importance of having a coach for those areas. It's very important to have a career coach. It's very important, if you are uncomfortable with speaking or you lack confidence, having a life coach. Like you're still gonna need coaching, because now you're an athlete in a different space.
What an amazing point. And I wonder how beneficial it would be if we have, career coaches at each college, university, across the board, and you get judged off of your wins and losses. How many of your kids are actually prepared now, after these 4 years that you've had them, to transition into education, corporate America, things like that, and you base wins and losses there? I think that it's needed. And I know we have a lot of, mentors in college, and we have different administrative people that they place on the staff to do various things. But basically, we've got to capitalize off of that more as far as career coaching, life coaching, I think.
I think that just because of the times that we're in, we're so much more advanced, and things are now being put in the forefront. You see that there are a lot of conversation, and you see a lot of companies like the NBA has this program where they're recruiting HBCU students to do different internships and participate in fellowships and things like that were not available, I'm sure, around your time, or I know it wasn't available when I was coming up, but that they can take advantage of. So I think that it's more prevalent. And then you have a lot of universities who their athletic departments now have player development roles on those teams that are specifically for that reason, to make sure that the players are aware of different opportunities on campus, like with career events and things like that, or they even bring people like myself, like you, in to do virtual workshops with their team. So I think that there are a lot of advancements being made. Again, the onus is really going to fall on the athlete, because just because all these resources are there, you really have to take advantage of them, and you have to be intentional about it, and know and understand, like own your career.
Yep.
Like they have to own that part of their lives and understand, okay, I got to be able to leverage, the relationships, the alumni network, the coaches, any opportunity that, even when they go and play different teams or participate in different tournaments, any kind of resource that is available to them, they've got to, take responsibility and participate, take advantage of it, sit in on the calls, attend, like when we went to New Jersey for the HBCU, and then there were 4 teams there, but only one team took advantage, Howard University. So that's partly on the coach, obviously making it mandatory, but, some of the players from the other teams could have been like, look, coach, we need to go. And they could have forced that hand, because a coach isn't going to tell you, no, you can't go to something that's going to help improve or enhance your experience as a college athlete, especially when it comes to you being prepared for life after.
So for me, when, it was my time to transition after sports and being able to, play 6 months and being cut by the Dallas Cowboys at the 53-man cut, I, had my bachelor's degree in public administration. I was working towards my master's.
You ain't get no criminal justice degree?
No.
How did you let that happen?
Absolutely not. And I was working towards my master's in adult education at the time, and we've all been taught, we go to college since we were kids. If you go to college and you get your degree, you're good. You're going to be fine. And, once I ended up, stopped, playing ball, it was very difficult to find a job. I mean, I was literally offered jobs to make minimum wage, $9 an hour. And it was like,
with a whole bachelor's
I mean, my first interview coming out of college, I mean, I put on the suit and tie, went in, and they're like, yeah, I think we can do like $9.50 an hour. I'm like, what? And I literally just walked out. But again, it's being unprepared. And I put a lot of that, in perspective. I put a lot of that on myself. But I also feel like we were underprepared to make that transition. And I see so many of my friends who are still struggling with that transition. So many athletes across the country still struggling with that transition. And I think that's why we do what we do when it comes to career development and trying to serve as a bridge between athletes who are transitioning from college, athletes who are playing professionally and trying to transition into careers.
I think knowing your value, it's hard for athletes to know their value outside of their sport. And when you go and you sit in front of an interview panel, because you don't know what, I'm a rebounder. Y'all ain't looking for nobody to rebound. Y'all looking for somebody to analyze this data.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so because I've never explored that part of me, I don't know what my value is in the marketplace.
Exactly.
And that's why you as an athlete who's, done all this, you won the championship at Auburn, you have, worked with the Dallas Cowboys, be it for 53 days, but there are a lot of athletes who didn't make it that far. And for you to walk into an interview and them insult you with $9 an hour when you have a degree, even if you didn't have one, but you have a degree. Had you understood your value and all that the value of your experience prior to walking in, you wouldn't have even taken the interview.
Exactly.
Because you would have known, what I'm going to do for $9.
Yep.
So I think that as a life coach, like a certified life coach and career strategist, it's important for me. It was important for me to marry the two because I know we don't know our value just from a self-worth perspective because everything about us is tied to who we are as an athlete. And once you take that away, we feel like, okay, I have no place. What do I do now? Did you watch the New Edition movie? And you remember, I think it was Ricky.
Can you stand? Is that New Edition?
And he was talking about, he was explaining to his wife he was on hard times, and she was like, well, did you go for the interview? And he was like, I do this. Ain't nobody hiring for that. So it's, what value do I have as a person first? That's why it's important that, athletes understand that this is what I do, is not who I am. So even if you take this from me, I'm still me and I still have something to offer. So now the job is the work in my perspective, just in my experience, the work is in making sure that athletes do that personal work to not tie their identities to the sport, and to also understand that their experience as an athlete has power and that they can leverage that in the marketplace. We talk about this all the time, how companies spend millions and millions, if not billions of dollars to train their employees to develop skills that we've been developing since you picked up a football, since I picked up a basketball. That carries weight. The problem, the challenge is, how do I communicate that on paper to a hiring manager who has never played sports, who has don't even like basketball, don't like football, hates athletes because he was never picked to play. So he's still dealing with his own trauma, right? So how do I communicate that? It starts internally. Like I totally believe that, just like with relationships, who you are attracts the kind of people that you're in relationship with, and who you are and understanding your value attracts the kind of jobs that you take. Had I had this perspective when I started coaching, there's a few jobs I wouldn't have taken.
For sure. And as an athlete, young athletes in general, just knowing your value, and knowing, like you said, the skill sets, the intangibles that you've had since 7 years old playing sports, transition seamless into the corporate America.
Across so many
discipline,
industries.
Communication, being on time, teamwork,
mental toughness.
It's
adaptability.
We're built for it, and that's the thing. We have to continue to try and make sure that the athletes understand that you're more than capable, knowing your value, so that they, you can help them with that transition. And
I'm so excited to have this conversation with our upcoming guest, Dominique Worship, who is a career coach and has worked in professional sports with the NBA in their diversity, equity, and inclusion to, help expose underrepresented communities to other opportunities in the sports industry outside of being on the playing field, because that's the advantage. Like if you talk about your experience as an athlete, and then you have your degree in public administration, and you take that into, you know, the business side of sports, so you're understanding how it impacts the athletes and the business. And that's a what is the word that I'm looking for? That's insight that a non-athlete would not have.
Yep.
So that's the advantage, right? So
Yeah.
that's the advantage. So I'm excited, super excited to have her on and to have that conversation.
Yeah, I'm excited as well, just to hear an advocate for athletes, and more so not only in the, you know, being on the field or being on the court, but being behind the camera, being a producer, having a compliance role,
Right.
you know, in industries, sports industries that we've been in our entire life. I know a lot of athletes who would love to be the creative marketing designer or be a program manager for a lot of these companies, you know, whether it's ESPN, whether it's, you know, whoever has that sports tie. So I'm excited to hear that conversation and just hear an advocate of getting us into those roles.